It's the Pacers. It's the Knicks. It's round 8 of a rivalry renewed. Locked on Knicks host Gavin Schall and I are going to break it all down. The key matchups, the stars, the early adjustments you could see in the series, and everything else important, plus predictions on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy weekend. Happy Sunday, Saturday, whenever you're listening to this, and welcome into a bonus edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're diving into the second round of the postseason. Pacers Knicks, pace versus offensive rebounding, depth versus less depth. Two teams that have a storied postseason history colliding once again in the Eastern Conference second round. It all begins Monday night in Madison Square Garden. Gavin Schall, one of the hosts of Locked On Knicks, and I get into all the aspects: Brunson, Haliburton, Siakam, Anunoby, the rebounding, the pace, the depth, all of it in a little bit of a glance today, and predictions. Although I'm recording the intro after my predictions, I made a prediction, and then Gavin said something that actually makes me want to revise my prediction, but I won't. That'd be stupid. But we get into a lot today. It's very good. Gavin was awesome. Let's just hop right in.
All right, guys, as promised, lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Tony East, the fantastic host of the Locked On Pacers podcast. You knew it was coming. Our bosses demanded. I also love talking to him. A Locked On crossover. Tony, how's it going? How hyped are you for Knicks Pacers? As you just told me, round 8.
8. Gosh, that's what makes it so fun to me is Spike and Reggie, and I hope Reggie's on the call for one of these, and just the history of, and it's, I believe it's 4-3, so the Knicks can even up the series of series. Is that a thing? So yeah, the history, two teams that play completely different Team USA guards. I mean, it's going to be a hoot. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm really hyped as well, and it is going to be such a nice departure. Maybe I'll regret saying this. The Pacers score like 180 points in game one, but the Knicks and the Sixers had the two lowest paces of any team in round one. You don't want both teams to have the lowest paces in the same series. It was such a slog. It was such a war. I never want to see Tyrese Maxey again. Presumably no one in Indiana is going to try to cripple Mitchell Robinson. So I might hate you and your team in like 5 days, but for now, Tony, it's all love. I'm super excited for it. You're nominally, just because I said I'd make the room for it, you're nominally the guest here. So I'm gonna be courteous and give you the honor. What's your first burning question about Knicks Pacers?
Yeah, the most interesting thing to me, we have it on the side, is the pace battle, and really I'd like to get even more granular than that because last year Knicks Cavs, this year again with Knicks Sixers. The Knicks on the glass has just become such a thing in these postseason settings where they're so they relentless on the offensive boards that even on possessions they don't score, they still have chances. I think it was 40-something% offensive rebound rate in Knicks Sixers. You
37% because they had one bad game. Outside of that, it was like 42, 43. Yeah,
just stunningly good, right? And so on one hand, that will be a strength against the Pacers. Don't get me wrong. The Pacers are not a good rebounding team. The reason it's interesting isn't because I think the Pacers have the perfect, we can just defensive rebound and be fine. It's that the Pacers want to run when they do get a rebound. And so if the Knicks go and don't get it, they are then more likely to give up points. And so obviously the Knicks are so elite at it that maybe they just don't care. We'll crash the glass, it'll be fine. Where the Knicks, great. But that battle, how both teams have to approach it and adjust to what is happening is such a unique dynamic in a playoff setting where usually it's like, how are we going to break down their defense? How are we going to stop this star player or that star player? Because my second most interesting thing is a who guards who question. But to me, it's like, what team can force the other one to adjust first from that core part of the game? Because that's such a key part of both teams' style of play. And if you have to adjust out of it, that's a big loss.
So the first question I had for you on my list is, what balance did the Knicks strike between crashing the glass and getting back into the game? So either we're both really smart or this was pretty obvious. Maybe both can be true. It's a great question. I don't think the Knicks are going to relent on the offensive glass.
They shouldn't.
Yeah, it is just too essential to who they are. and their first option on offense is Jalen Brunson. Their second option on offense is rebound and put back Jalen Brunson shot. Their third option on offense, and maybe even their second, is rebound Jalen Brunson's missed shot, kick it out to someone for an open three. Like those are the three options. And then you get into Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart and OG Anunoby from there. But they needed to get the points. If not, they're just not going to score enough, because Jalen Brunson is the lone guy left who can consistently create a shot. Maybe we'll get to this a little later. OG Anunoby has shown flashes of that. Dante DiVincenzo had his one good game in the series outside of game 2 to close out the Sixers. So that was all encouraging. But I think the Knicks are just going to have to risk it. What I was curious about, and apologies, this is way wrong, because I was stunned when I saw this. I cannot say I watched a ton of Pacers Bucks, but looking up the pace stats in the playoffs, the Pacers only had the 9th fastest pace in the playoffs. Granted, it was all like pretty close together, so one game could have swung that. But I'm curious what Milwaukee did to kind of gum up the gears of Indiana getting out in transition, and what the balance they struck there. Indiana in the regular season not held under 100 points just once. Milwaukee did it twice against them. What did the Bucks find success with, and do you think the Knicks can replicate that even if they are super aggressive on the glass?
Yeah, there's a couple parts of just the raw pace numbers that are interesting, because pace is like a whole game for both teams. And so if the Bucks possessions are long, it's going to make the Pacers pace lower. And that's part of it, is the Bucks are really creaky and old. So that naturally slowed the game down. Game 5 specifically, to mention one you just said, where the Pacers scored less than 100, was so slow, like 17 seconds per possession slow. And that's how the Bucks want to play. And the Pacers stunk. They're not good at that. And so I wouldn't say they were doing anything awesome. That's the most they scored in a game in the series. And the Pacers advice said, when we're taking the ball out of the net, we can't run as much, right? That's part of it. But that's also the game they switched the most in defensively. And it was the first time they did it all series, so that was part of this as well. But that forces the Pacers to think a little more. And you just naturally, as a player, when there's a lot of switching, go, oh, there's a mismatch. And you think about mismatch hunting instead of playing your offense and just keep going and going. And the Pacers offense is fast, but when they think about mismatch hunting and doing something else, it slows down. And so that the way they were like covering Haliburton all series and the Bucks actually scoring all came together to make that game particularly slower. And in general, that's how the Bucks wanted this to go. I'd have to pull up the individual game logs. I don't remember, but I believe the fastest games in the series were game 2, a huge Pacers by double-digit win on the road, and game 6, the closeout game at home. They won both of those. So I think that they would be above average in pace in those settings, in those games. But in general, they slowed down a little post-Siakam trade. And when they focused more on defense, I would say Christmas-ish to look back at their season. They're still top 5. I'm not saying they're like a slow team, but in general, I think some of that's the Bucks and some of that's just how the Pacers with Siakam play now. But they're still obviously a very big threat in transition and just trying to go as fast as they can.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it's going to be a fascinating challenge for the Knicks, because they weren't always perfect in transition defense, even against Philly, who was not trying to run very much. You mentioned Indiana, the uptick defensively, pretty average on defense, which is massive for them, as they were, if not the worst defense in basketball, correct me if I'm off, and there's one of the worst defenses in basketball first half of the year.
They hit 30th a few times. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. How is that all Siakam? Is that a commitment to a different style? And did that, just looking at it statistically, like how did that show up in the Milwaukee series and translate over to the playoffs?
Yeah, a couple points of the season where their defensive momentum and ability turned. One is one I mentioned around Christmas. They changed the starting lineup. Jalen Smith came in for Obi Toppin, and they got bigger, like up and down up and down the roster. And their bench rotation made more sense too. So that helped their defense quite a bit. They were better on the glass. They were better defending. Then Siakam came in, and they naturally had size to actually put it to 4. And it's not that Siakam himself is the greatest defender. He's fine. It's what it did is now Aaron Nesmith is not guarding a 4 every game, where he's 4 inches shorter than his matchup. Like the game before they traded for Siakam, Andrew Nembhard was guarding Lauri Markkanen, and it was the Pacers' best option in that game, right? The Siakam himself, again, is fine, but everyone else can now guard someone that makes sense. Like Nembhard can now guard Jalen Brunson in this series, which maybe wouldn't be possible if other things were the case. So that's what's made them like, they're still not awesome. They're average to slightly below average, but like credible enough. And the trade-off of that was they went from first in offense to second. So like obviously worth it to do all those things. And the Celtics are just a machine. So yeah, they're not a good defensive team still, But I mean, they had enough good moments to beat the Bucks, even though that team was a hobbled team. So I think they'll try to rely on that again. My defense question, I would like you to guess because I have no idea. I've heard different answers from a lot of people I've asked. Do you think OG Anunoby guard Siakam or Haliburton when the series starts?
I think he guards Pascal Siakam.
That is, I think, the most common answer.
Yeah, he found an immense amount of success later in the series against the Sixers, where they took him out of the Tyrese Maxey lineup.
Joel.
Game 5 or game 4 moved him to Joel, but then game 5 and 6, he was full time off that matchup, and that was the big shift. And he became just an incredible rim protector, not like insane block numbers, but altered shot after shot after shot. In game 6, like as much as Dante DiVincenzo played brilliant defense on Tyrese Maxey, it was even more so about Anunoby just doing the Roy Hibbert and just being perfectly vertical. R.I.P. King in a basketball sense. He's alive and still very funny. Just being super vertical at the rim, and he was awesome doing that. And to me, that is the best way to use him. Though Haliburton, it is a fascinating question in the sense that Maxey was just a terrible matchup for what Anunoby's great at, because he was just a notch too quick. And if you had all the sliders on Anunoby's defense, maybe quickness would be like 95 for his size, like 80 overall. That is maybe the one area he can be beat. That's not really how Haliburton beats people. So I'd be surprised if Tibbs doesn't try it, because obviously you really gum up Haliburton, you gum up the Pacers offense, and that could be more important than rim protection against a team that is not crazy in terms of applying rim pressure. So I think it's a fascinating battle.
Yeah, I think just a brief would be like, I think you're right. I think OG will start the series on Pascal for all the reasons you said, but there's an OG on Haliburton, Hart on Turner, and Hartenstein on Siakam alignment that would work to me. You'd be risking Turner in the post, but I don't know. If Haliburton's just tearing you up, you might have to live with that. But that would be my thinking on what they would try otherwise. But I agree with you. I think OG on Siakam is how they start.
That's interesting. I'd love to talk more about that, but these shows have to be a certain amount of time. So we're going to keep moving. We buried the lead. Two of the best point guards in the NBA, two Team USA point guards, friends, rivals, frenemies, maybe. We'll talk about it next. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team it with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like Digging for Treasure or Robot Panchico Machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
I also want to tell you guys about FanDuel. It's winner take all right now in the NBA and NHL. How about that? The Knicks and Rangers and Pacers all still going. Are you kidding? What a time for these fan bases in FanDuel, giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers on FanDuel get $150. That's a lot in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads or player props or money lines, whatever you like. They got it and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count even more on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so let's talk point guards. I need to start here because I've been wondering about this pretty much all season, and I just have not got a chance to ask you, Tony, on the Bill Simmons patented 1 to 100 percentage scale. He was the first person to come up with it ever. What percentage is Tyrese Haliburton? Whether you interpret that as health or effectiveness, that's all good with me. What parts of his game haven't come back? And just for the Knicks fans listening who have not super followed this, Tyrese Haliburton before hurting his hamstring, if I'm remembering correctly, 25 points, 12 assists, 4 rebounds on 51%, 42% shooting, 42% from 3, 87% from the line. Pretty solid case as the second or third best offensive player on planet Earth. Since the injury, 17-9-4 on 46, 32, 84. And because people love having numbers thrown at them against the Bucks, 16-9-5 on 44, 30, 96 shooting in the first playoff series of his career. So what's up with Hallie? How healthy is he? What should we expect in this series?
He says let me be clear. He says that he is 100% healthy. No star player ever on the history of planet Earth has ever been like, yeah, I'm hurt, and shows weakness. They don't do that.
Joel Embiid, maybe a little, maybe a tiny bit.
That is perfect timing from you. That's funny. Okay, most star players are typically like, don't show signs of weakness. I'm great. I respect that. I actually now believe him. There was a while he was saying I'm 100% that I was like, I can watch you. But now I believe, like, when he started dunking almost every game again, that's when I was like, okay, his explosiveness back. You read the two. There are two things that shifted for him. But the biggest number drop off of all the ones you just said is his 3-point percentage by a mile, like 10% from pre and post hamstring injury. And it's never fully recovered. And then the first round, it was only 30%. So for a while, I was tracking this after the All-Star break. His 2-point percentage was like career best numbers. His passing was just as often. I have to be clear about that because they traded away Buddy Hield and their shooting went like dropped as a team. So his assist numbers were lower because other guys weren't scoring. So like his passing and 2-point scoring was the same. And the threes were just gone. That's not to excuse this. That's a huge part of what made him so awesome for the first 2.5 months is he would take 8, 9, 10 threes a game and make a lot of them. Right. So without that, he is still very good. Right. One of the best passers in the league. The Bucks, even when he's shooting 30% from through, are like, oh my God, we have to send 2 guys to him immediately. This guy's very good. He's still very talented. He hit the biggest shot of the series in overtime of game 3. Right. Great player. But if the 3 is this for some reason, whether that's because he's 95 because of the hamstring, or he's just doesn't have it, like something mentally is blocking him putting the threes, then yeah, he's not 100. The number is not 100, and he has not been that level of shooter since January 8th or whatever, which is now 4 months ago. So I can't say 100, even though he says he's healthy. I'll just say like 90. He still draws all the attention of defenses. He's still very threatening. He got up 12 threes in his best game of the series. He missed 11 of them, but like he's still getting open, right? So he's still very good. He's still going to be an integral part of the series, but you were right to mention the Knicks only saw this guy once on December 30th, but he's not the guy he was pre-injury, and most of it is just the threes. If he makes the threes, though, he might be back. We'll see.
All right, and then the other end of this point guard battle is, of course, Jalen Brunson.
I love Jalen Brunson. Can I just say that before you start?
Yeah, this is good. This is good. No, get it out now. I don't know if you will in like a week. Same thing. Brunson on the year, 36 points per game against the Pacers, shot 49% from the field, decently from 3, 10 trips to the line per game. He was amazing against them. And you said earlier, if I heard you correctly, Nembhard gets to start on him. I was wondering if they were going to try Naismith there, and that might just be like a size matchup thing, because I know Naismith had some decent moments guarding him or on play. Some of them plays Brunson scored on, but I still was really impressed with how he guarded Jalen Brunson. What is the defensive philosophy after we just saw the Sixers throw everything at him and have an incredible amount of success through the first 2 games and then get torched for the most part with some successes the last 4 games of that series?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to say the Sixers just tried what I would try and they lost. So maybe it's stupid, but like, don't you want, if Josh Hart makes 3 or 4 threes, you might just lose. You might just lose to the Knicks. Same with what was DiVincenzo in game 6-5 for something, like he made a bunch, right? Like,
yeah, great.
If that just happens, you just lose, right? Because Brunson's so good that you don't want to just let him wiggle into his, money shots in the lane the whole game. He's going to make $1 million. I mean, he did against the Pacers all season long. The thing about, like, the reason I said I love Brunson, like that Heat series last year, I hate the way he got talked about because the rest of the Knicks sucked and he was unbelievable every game. Like he was there. He was the engine of everything. That whole series, it was very depressing. They couldn't do a little better. And the Heat were like an unstoppable machine, whatever. But he was awesome. And so in the playoffs, my kind of operating assumptions, like you just can't stop Jalen Brunson. Like you just can't. You have to try. Like you can't just give him no deterrence and just be like, yeah, we'll shut off everybody else. So I think you have to hope that Josh Hart doesn't light you up from deep and DiVincenzo doesn't light you up from deep and Anunoby doesn't run straight to the basket unencumbered for sick dunks late in games, which was awesome, by the way. As an IU guy, I have to say that. But it's not easy to do.
Tony, you're flattering me this whole time. Amazing.
I love this.
Yeah, keep going. Keep saying nice things.
I'm sorry. I really like this Knicks team. So I think the question about stopping, let me put air quotes up, stopping Jalen Brunson is how much Brunson are you willing to live with versus all that other stuff? And so that's part of why the Knicks won the most epic game ever in game 2 is because Josh Hart hit a bunch of threes in the first half and DiVincenzo in game 6. Like, that's not the only reason, but that mattered a lot. So you got to decide how much of what you're living with Brunson, because I bet they start the series with Nembhard on him. And the difference is that there was nowhere else to put Nembhard against the Bucks. Now there is, because the Knicks don't line up particularly huge. So they could go Nesmith on him if they need to adjust. But I bet they start there and see how great the role guys can do and how easy it is for Brunson to get his 40. But I mean, I don't know that there's a way to stop any star in the playoffs, especially someone who is, the 5th best player in the NBA this year. But you got to slow him and then see if the other shooters can beat you at that level. That's what I would try. But the Sixers just lost trying that exact same thing. So maybe not a good idea.
I think it worked decently. Those games were slogs. I mean, you mentioned, I'm circling way back here, but the Bucks going 17, 18 seconds in the shot clock. That was pretty much the Knicks offense, especially in the latter portions of the series. It was give it to Jalen Brunson, take the air out of the basketball, hope he can make magic happen in the last 4 or 5 seconds against a great defense. And he was mostly able to do it. And that was pretty much enough for the Knicks to win. But there were also these long stretches where the Knicks just wouldn't score. I mean, they shot 15% in the second quarter of game 6, maybe 20%. I can't remember. I obliviated the number from my head, but there have been times where it's been really, really ugly for the Knicks offense. So I think Nick Nurse, he did some brilliant stuff in terms of slowing up Jalen. And I'm wondering, like, what is the extent you think that Indiana is willing to play off of Josh Hart and go all the way back to the beginning of that series where they were pretty much just willing to let him shoot open threes. And then they went the other way and they're like, all right, we're going to guard him now. And Brunson went off. And then they sort of went to a middle strategy in game 6, which it would kind of be my approach. Like what's Rick Carlisle's appetite for just daring the Knicks role guys outside of probably DiVincenzo to just take threes?
I think it's going to be pretty high. I mean, they weren't like willing to, but they were pretty much like, yeah, you know what, Brook Lopez, go for it. Like go crazy. And in game 2, he did. But that sometimes that's what it takes to slow down more threatening or more consistent players. And like the thing about Brunson, Dame, whoever they played the first round, is like it's not just about the shot that they take or make. Like if they get a rhythm, it's like a snowballing effect for the whole game. Versus that's not as much the case with role players. So you got to have that appetite. The problem is, this goes back to what we started with. The Pacers are not the best rebounding team. And like, if you leave Josh Hart open, like he's just going to swoop in and what he averaged in the first round, like 11, 12 again. Like,
12 rebounds.
Yeah. 12. He's 3 inches taller than me. Like what? How? It's crazy. So he is tricky. And especially if he's making them, and like, you still have to think about where he is at all times. So it's just hard. It's just really hard. And Dante can make him. And OG, I don't know if he has with the Knicks, but he has a history of making them. Like,
he made really good from the corners, not so great from everywhere else.
Pascal is the same way. Maybe that's just the Raptors thing. So I don't know. And that will, I think game 1 will set the tone for a lot of that, because then you adjust from there, right? That's how the series typically go. As the Pacers learned in their first series, they lost game 1, had to adjust, and it worked great for them. So I think we'll learn a lot about that pretty early, but I think they have to have an appetite for just like, you know what, Knicks, if you make threes, you just win. Breaking news from Locked On here. Making shots is good. But anyway, I think that's kind of the appetite they'll have to have.
All right. That sounds good to me. I want to talk a little bit more about how the Knicks can slow down Pascal Siakam, what they should do with Myles Turner. And then maybe we'll finish off with a little Knicks Pacers history lesson from our guy, Tony. All that next.
You want to make your mom smile this Mother's Day? It's coming up, and you can start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered that very same day. With DoorDash, moms are a gift. So give her the best this Mother's Day. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is, thanks to DoorDash, where you can select hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets, the best of tech, self-care essentials, and more, delivered right to her door. If she's got a sweet tooth, or she's a tech enthusiast, or like my mom, a beauty connoisseur, or if she's outdoorsy, no matter what she's into, you can make her smile with fruit or flower or bouquet or makeup or tech care workout wear and more. You can pair stuff like flowers and a gift card, and again, delivered the same day with DoorDash. Shop with savings that would make her proud. With a Dash Pass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees. Get your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15+ on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply.
All right, Pascal Siakam, weird series versus the Bucks. Incredible. The first two games they combined 73 points. From there, slowed down substantially. A couple of games, 12, 14. Did not, at least offensively, just going off the box score, did not have as much of an impact. Where are you at on him coming into this series? And we never got to see it during the regular season, but how do you think OG Anunoby will be able to take on that matchup that's probably happened a billion times in Raptors practices and now will happen for the first time ever in a real game?
Yeah, Raptors people need to descend on this series. And Nick Nurse was in the last one. It's been crazy. So the first two games, the Bucks tried Brook Lopez on him. The thought being, let's put our rim guy down below this guy who's not that great of a shooter. And Siakam was like, I'm way faster than this guy, and I can make this elbow jumper if he sags off. And he just put him in all game. And the first game they lost by so much, the Bucks just stuck with it. And then he killed them in game two, which was the only road win of the series, a critical game. And so then the Bucks were like, we can't do that cross match anymore. And they put Bobby Portis on Siakam, much more mobile. And yeah, it slowed Siakam, but then Myles Turner could just cook Brook Lopez for 2 games. And so it wasn't necessarily, obviously statistically he was not as good, but a lot of it was just like, oh, Myles Turner's a way better option. They should not go through Siakam as often. And again, he didn't produce as much. I'm not saying he was as good, but that was a big part of it numerically. Like game 6, what he finished with 19 points, but like 16 of them in the second half. Like he really came alive when it mattered there. So I think OG can be closer to Bobby Portis than Brook Lopez by a mile, obviously. So that will be tough on him, right? Guys that can keep him away from the rim, or like guys who know his spin move, which guess what? Anunoby's guarded a lot, presumably in practice, or, guys who know what his pet shots are, like they're going to be really tough on him. So, maybe it's just use Siakam as a screener bunch and see how much the Knicks switch. Maybe it's hope Siakam can make corner threes, like you talked about with Anunoby. I don't know, because they found ways to succeed without him cooking, after games 1 and 2. Like that, it was fine, but obviously him being good is very important. He's a very good player. They traded a lot for him for a reason. So how much Anunoby can slow him down and keep him out of those spots, and they can't put a big on him, so they got to try to stick with that as long as they can, will be fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I think what the balance Anunoby strikes, because presumably, even though your Josh Hart scenario is still percolating in my head, but like if the Knicks I'd be surprised if they didn't start this way. Start with Hartenstein and then Mitchell Robinson guarding Myles Turner up top. Obviously, the beauty of the Pacers offense that takes 2 great rim protectors away from the basket where they're at their best. It takes 2 great rebounders away from the basket where they're at their best. And
Turner's got to make the threes for that to matter, which did happen in the first round. That was valuable.
Yeah, he was amazing until game 6. And that takes away or it makes OG's rim protection, even if the Pacers are not the heaviest rim team in the league, that much more essential. But I wonder if in that scenario, just because Haliburton is less inclined than Maxey to finish at the rim and much better and much more inclined to spray it out to the perimeter, are you basically taking the same gamble that the Pacers are with the Knicks role players and saying, all right, Pascal Siakam, take 1,000,000 threes. If you Grant Williams us, you Grant Williams us. And I'm curious how that battle goes, because to me, like as long as Anunoby starts on Siakam and doesn't start on Haliburton, if you reference, as you referenced, it's going to be something the Knicks have to find the right balance with.
I agree. And that's such an interesting part of the playoffs is like, what are you willing to live with? Right. And I think that the very different clashes and styles of these teams make that burning questions that will last this whole series. Like you have to, I bet that'll slide a lot around. We didn't hit something earlier that I want to go back to if we can right now. So the Pacers, known for their depth this regular season, you can very much quickly tell where I'm going with this. They played 9 guys successfully in their closeout game, 10 minutes or more for all of them. And part of that is that they like their depth. Part of that's that McConnell and Toppin were amazing. And part of that is that they play fast, and that requires a bit of a breather sometimes when they're playing fast. The Knicks in their closeout game did not play 9 players. They played 7, and one of them did what is Deuce at 9 minutes and something and change, right? Barely over 9.
In which game? In game 6?
In game 6, yeah.
Yeah, something. He didn't play a ton.
So they played 6 guys, right? What will that look like? Will it matter, right? For the Knicks, it has not at all, right? They've just been like, yep, these are our 5. We'll sprinkle in Mitch Rob and Deuce when we need to, because now Bojan's out for the season. Right? That happened during the first round. They don't have Randall. Their bottom 4 guys are just not playoff dudes. Maybe they can go to Precious, who crushed the Pacers, by the way, in a regular season game, which I think means they will probably go to him early in the series. But I'm curious what you think it's depth. People talk about it like it's less important in the playoffs because it is. But the Pacers, it's a superpower. Like McConnell and Obi Toppin had 41 points in their closeout game. Like, how much do you think it will matter in this series?
I'm just gonna say it's gonna suck so much when Obi averages like 25 a game.
You guys loved Obi last year, right? You were all over.
I still love Obi. The person, and I like him a lot as a player.
Well, did you hear the talk about this? That people were like, man, are the Knicks beating themselves up that they never went to Toppin plus Randall after Toppin plus Siakam was a great front court in the first round of the playoffs?
I was beating him up for like the last 3 years, so I don't have to hear that. Yeah, no, it would have been cool. But anyways, yeah. So circling back on the depth question, I think I don't know if they will. I think the Knicks have to try Alec Burks early in the series. The one game he played against the Pacers was he had 22 points. It was a little deceptive, if I'm remembering correctly. It's just a bunch of like late threes when the Pacers were up by a bit, but he cooked in the fourth quarter. And I think Indiana, to your point, like if they want to bog themselves down matchup hunting, so be it, especially like if you match Burks' minutes to Anunoby and you just have an eraser on the back end, like I'm totally willing to do that. I think it's less harmful than it would have been against Philly. And I just think it's just a necessity at this point with Indiana's pace, with the workload on these guys. And it's not like, for Pacers fans, this is not a playoff thing. This has been the last 3 months for the Knicks ever since Julius Randle went down. Right. It's been 46 minutes for Josh Hart frequently. DiVincenzo either plays 48 or 22, depending on how well he shoots in the first half. And Jalen Brunson is around 40 in the regular season, around 44 in the playoffs. OG Anunoby, now fully healthy, Tim says, all right, you can play every second then. And that is just the way it's gone since the Bogey injury. So I think the Knicks could mess around with this by going to that OG Precious look that they went to at the end of game 4 that was so effective against Philly. I wouldn't mind seeing that and just letting Precious like get in Myles Turner grill and trying to bother him from distance, and you'd be a little bit more switchable against Haliburton. So that's a wrinkle to get Precious involved a little bit. But that was also a game Mitchell Robinson was out. And Tom Thibodeau is always super hesitant to play without a true center on the floor if he doesn't have to. He did go incredibly small at one point against Indiana, where he was playing Bojan Bogdanovic at center. I think that was in the third game of the year. He only does that though when they're down by too much to win. And it's kind of just so he can say, "See, it doesn't work. Why would I ever go small?" So to answer your question, I think they have to. Will they? I can't get inside the mind of a lunatic, so I'm not even going to try to answer that.
Good lunatic, to be clear.
A good lunatic I've come to love over time.
Yeah, this is just seared in my memory because of how that game went. The Knicks win over the Pacers. Precious played 43 minutes and had 16 rebounds, and 8 of them were offensive. And like all of them were like, the Pacers finally have a chance to cut it to some reasonable number. And then they'd get a stop, and then Pressure's like, nah, never mind. Like, wow, okay. So that game just steered in my brain. So that is the style that this series could take on. Like if that's what the Pacers play like and they're soft on the glass, they'll just lose. So I think that depth factor, especially if Precious can play or Burks can have any sort of impact, will be fascinating because Pacers are going to run and they're going to play 8 or 9 guys and make it happen.
All right, Tony, I had some very specific TJ McConnell questions, but I'm going to spare everyone that. Do you want to do a minute on Knicks Pacers history? Anything interesting you found this week?
Can I tell you why that I think that I won't talk about it enough because we don't have enough time between the series. There is an entire Wikipedia page that's called Pacers Knicks rivalry, right? Like awesome. That is what this is. And I know that it's a little different now, especially for newer air quotes fans, because they've only played one series since 2000,
and right? It haunts my dreams, Tony. So don't diminish it. But yeah, go ahead.
Hibbert block, man. That game 6 was unreal. Yeah, the Knicks fans love that 2013 team, right? That was like
it was great. I hope you guys have nightmares about Chris Copeland. So
he was not as good with the Pacers as he was.
I was going to say he was so good in that series that Indiana was like, why don't we just sign this guy and win the championship?
But obviously prior to that, they met in 2000, the year after the Knicks made the finals, and I believe beat the Pacers in the 99 playoffs. The Pacers beat the Knicks the next year when they went to the finals, but they played 6 times in the 90s and then again in 2000, right? So 5 times in the 90s, 2000 and 2013. A lot of series and a lot of close series. 2 game 7s, 3 of them went to 6. Only one truly like ugly, gross series. They've all been tough. They've all really represented like what you think of when you think of these franchises. And they all had like the same stars, right? Reggie, Ewing, all those guys forever. because they were so close together. So it sounds dumb to say that this is like a continuation of that. It's been so long, it's different stars, but the fact that they had so many battles when these teams were like at a high level for like a decade was awesome. The 2013 series was like a very gritty Pacers team, but a grittier Knicks team. It's just fun. And so I think that will be a fun part of this is who gets dug out of the woodworks to sit courtside for these games. Does Reggie Miller get the call on any of the TNT games? What does Spike Lee think about the Pacers fun? Like, it's going to be awesome. I just think that's going to be awesome.
I'm super excited. You made me commit to making a prediction before we started.
Yes,
this.
I did.
Almost want to say either Knicks in 5 or Pacers in 7, just because I don't know how this Knicks team can physically survive playing 7 games at this point. But I'm gonna split the baby, and I'm gonna say Knicks in 6. I think the rebounding is just like an issue that I'm not sure Indiana can overcome. That being said, the Pacers' depth, their speed, if they just shoot well for the right games at the right times, like they can certainly win this series. And I think it's going to be super competitive and live up to the great history between the two teams. What do you think?
I agree that it will be a longer series. How does it make you feel that every ESPN analyst picked Knicks in something?
I really don't like that. But go ahead. And it's gonna be even worse if you pick the Knicks now. But
I will join them. I am going to pick the Knicks. I'm picking the Knicks in 7 because I think the rebounding is going to travel and be very hard to adjust to, right? Even if the Knicks are getting killed in transition, I think that battle will give them just enough edges that the Pacers can't have off games offensively. I think the Pacers can win this series, certainly, right? They did well. They don't matter. We figured that out in the first round. The regular season games don't matter, but like they showed that they're not like immune to the Knicks style. They can do well against it. I think Myles Turner is a huge X factor. I think Haliburton again going is an X factor, but I think the Knicks are so good on the glass that it's going to be really tough for the Pacers to overcome that. And if they get out possessioned, it's not going to look like the Cavs series last year, obviously. The Pacers are a lot better than that Cavs team, but there could be moments or games where it looks a little like that. And I think that is why I'm picking Knicks in 7. Good luck winning a game 7 in MSG. But I will say that I'm like 55% Knicks, 45% Pacers. It is not a big gap to me.
No, I think it's going to be really competitive. And I think this is a somber note to end the pod on. So hopefully most people have turned it off at this point. I think the Knicks are a walking corpse in some way.
Wow.
Like Bojan, that sounds dark, and it's
7 players was stunning to me in that game 6.
It was 6.5 to your point. Yeah, and it was mostly about maybe the Celtics looming in the next round. That might be the source of my pessimism, but I think losing Bojan was just one guy too many. And I think about how Buddy Hield just came off the bench and ripped 5 threes in the first half, and the Knicks just losing that possibility with Bojan out. I think it's a bigger loss than people think. Of course, it's more time where you just have great defenders, but you just see the fatigue piling up. Like Jalen Brunson typically does not miss clutch free throws. He missed a bunch of them. Josh Hart could barely make a free throw down the stretch. Like just mental mistakes, not getting rebounds late in that Philly game where they were the fresher team. Like Indiana can replicate some of that just because they're going to have more energy. So that is the fear here. And if it does get to 7, even if it's at MSG, I mean, this Knicks team, like it's just hard to doubt them at this point. But there's a world where Indiana wins just because the Knicks are completely wiped. One final stat I wanted to throw in, and then we could go. The Pacers in the first round, 9.8 turnovers per game, least of any team in the first round. In beating the Bucks, they had the best assist to turnover ratio of any team in any series in the last 30 years. Shout out to NBA.com for that great stat. I'm going to
I didn't even know that.
Right, that's from Steve Ashburner. Incredible stat. Shout out to Steve. That in terms of the possession battle, that can even things up if the Knicks kill them on the glass.
Great point. Dang, that is like making me think.
Yeah, Pacers in 7, baby. Let's go. Tony said it. Not everyone's picking the Knicks. We can win the series. Goodbye.